Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and the holy places, however, were to be a separate international corpus separatum. This is actually important, and I will come back to it in a minute. Because the General Assembly decided, at the same time as it was decided this division of the country between a minority, which got most of the territory, the Jewish population at that time was about a third, and a majority, which got the minority of the country. At the same time as it made this decision, it also decided that the holy places had to be under an international authority. And this was the basis of the decision that Jerusalem be a so-called corpus separatum. And this was specifically, you can read General Assembly Resolution 181 of 29 November 1947. There are paragraphs and paragraphs, lengthy passages, which deal with the importance of holy sites, the importance of sacred religious sites, and how they were supposed to be protected. Again, I will come back to this. Now, it's important to note that this resolution was in fact respected neither by Israel nor by Jordan, whose military forces were engaged in fighting in Jerusalem, neither of which respected the provisions for the internationalization of Jerusalem, and whose forces ended up taking over, respectively, the western and eastern sides of the city during the war. An armistice line, the Green Line, so-called, was drawn by an Israeli-Jordanian Armistice Commission in 1949, and that was the line along which Jerusalem was divided until 1967. I want to stress again that the incorporation of neither the western part of Jerusalem into Israel, nor the incorporation of the eastern part of Jerusalem into Jordan was recognized either by the great powers or by the international community, then or later. And I'm going to mention a couple of Security Council resolutions, which, in fact, much later stress this fact. Thus, neither annexation after 1948 had ever enjoyed international legitimacy. And you may say, well, how do you know this is still the case? It's very clear. Jordan's claim is lapsed. The Jordanian occupation was never recognized by any country except Pakistan, and it has lapsed. Jordan does not any longer maintain a claim to East Jerusalem. But no country maintains its embassy in Jerusalem because of this undecided status, because of the fact that both Jordan and Israel were considered to have been in violation of General Assembly Resolution 181. Other provisions of that General Assembly Resolution were not respected. The Arab state was never established. The borders that were established with Israel were soon disappeared, and Israel expanded to 78% of Palestine during the war of 1948. Now, changes on the ground in this cemetery did not begin until the 1960s. And the Israeli authorities, with the cemetery under the control of the custodian of absentee property, carried out three major transformations. The first was the transformation of the western side, about half of the park, maybe 15 or 16 acres, maybe a little more, into what is called Hatikva Park, Independence Park, still in existence to this day. That's the western end of what was originally the cemetery. The northern end was paved over and turned into a parking lot. A corner in the northwest became a school, or at least buildings that were originally in schools and a school. It's not clear what use they're put to or if they're abandoned today. The rest of the cemetery, the eastern half, or the eastern third, whatever was left after those encroachments and desecrations of this cemetery had taken place, remained abandoned, frequented by drug addicts, prostitutes. I visited the cemetery myself in the 80s, and it was not a place you'd go voluntarily. It was completely abandoned. Gravestones were being broken open. Such foliage and shrubbery was in a terrible state. It's important to remember that at this time, and to the present, the authorities that should have had control of what is, in Islamic law, inalienable, a property held in inalienable trust for the Muslim community, were not allowed to exercise their authority over it. So they were not allowed to maintain what was left of the cemetery. And Palestinian citizens of the State of Israel until 1966 lived under military rule. They could not travel, they could not move, they could not demonstrate, they could not meet without permission of the military authorities. And so it was not possible for them to exercise any kind of control or authority over this cemetery. There were protests by the Jordanians, and after 1966, when the military rules were lifted, Palestinian citizens of Israel began to protest the status of the cemetery, as did Palestinians in what was now, after 1967, occupied Arab East Jerusalem. The irony in all of this, given these three major transformations of the cemetery, the establishment of Independence Park, the paving over of part of it for parking lot, and the establishment of a couple of buildings in the northwest corner, is that the Israeli government initially claimed that it would protect this cemetery. It responded in 1948 to a protest over its takeover by saying that it recognized that it's, quote, one of the most prominent Muslim cemeteries. In 1964, the Israeli government designated the cemetery as an antiquity site. At almost exactly the same time, these encroachments began in the 1960s. As late as 2002, the Israeli government reaffirmed some of these things, reaffirming the importance of the cemetery and its status as an antiquity site. These declarations, unfortunately, did not impede these and earlier developments. Now, all of these things would be considered a desecration of a religious site. But although many tombs were disturbed or destroyed, many tombstones may have been destroyed, maybe other antiquities, in the process of the creation of the park and the paving over of the parking lot. None of them involved extensive excavations. In fact, the parking lot, they basically laid asphalt over part of the cemetery. This changed when the Simon Wiesenthal Center was given permission by the Israeli authorities and given title by the Israel Lands Authority, which got it from the custodian of absent property, to build a so-called Center for Human Dignity, a museum of tolerance on the part of the museum, the part of the cemetery that had been turned into a parking lot in the 1960s. The plans called for a very large building. They've since been scaled down, but excavations for that building began several years ago. Michael was actually there after the excavations began. He can tell you what they look like, insofar as you can see them. There's an enormous fence around the site. And these excavations, according to a variety of witnesses, have led to the removal or the displacement or the destruction of hundreds and hundreds of human remains, and or their removal to unknown sites. The Simon Wiesenthal Center's dean, Rabbi Martin Heyer, has said these remains have been removed. Nobody who is a member of any of the families which have their ancestors buried there, no Muslim authority, to the best of my knowledge, has been told where these things are. So we have it on the good rabbi's authority that they have been removed. We do not know to where. Now, I could describe what was found on the site that was designated for the museum. I don't know if I should leave this to you. Gideon said, but it is Israeli law that anywhere that you're going to dig, given that this is the Holy Land, has to be subject to an archaeological check, a test.